So, what is dementia? Well, dementia itself is not a disease. Dementia itself is caused by a disease, which means that the dementia itself is a collection or series of symptoms. So what you see is the dementia. What causes it is the disease. I found it a bit difficult to get my head around that, but once I got it and it clicked, suddenly I realised why the symptoms of lots of different dementias are all very similar, the same. And so, for instance, with Lewy bodies dementia, which is actually a disease, and my own, which is frontotemporal primary progressive aphasia, which is a disease, they both produce or make symptoms in the person, present symptoms in the person which are called dementia. So we'll go through the likely symptoms first of dementia. The clearest obvious one that first happens is people start forgetting things. They forget addresses, names, they forget conversations that they've already had with somebody, and so that's why they start repeating the same question, and they're answered that question by somebody, but then it just literally goes in one ear and out the other. You know, when we said to our kids, oh, that's gone in one ear and out the other with him, isn't it? Like, you know, my mum probably said that about me lots of times. Anyway, but that is exactly how it is with people with dementia. You do tell us something and we understand it fully, and for those few seconds it sinks in and we get it. We understand it, you know, we're excited about something up and coming, you know, a visit to the theatre or the cinema or something like that, or meeting somebody. For those few seconds or maybe even minutes, we get that and it becomes part of our memory. But because it's only a short-term memory, sometimes within even just a few seconds, it's just not there. It's as if we were never ever told that fact, that piece of information. It's just dissipated. Now, if I explain it to you like, when a piece of information comes into our head, lots of little electrical pulses happen and they preserve that memory on a particular cell in our brains, for instance, just for sake of arguments. It's almost like a RAM on a computer, but when you turn that off, it gets lost. It just goes back to zero, and then you turn it back on again and there's nothing there. So that memory comes into us, gets joined up, becomes a tangible, slight volatile memory, if you like, and unless in a normal brain that would stay there and be stored away and stored away and stored away in little boxes and spreadsheets and file cabinets and folders and things like that in a normal person, like, you know, that's what the normal human brain does. That's its purpose, like, you know. However, with the dementia symptoms, then what happens is the connections sometimes don't occur. They don't occur in the first place, but more often what happens is they get a little bit disturbed and they don't get through quick enough or fast enough, and they don't get through solid enough, so then they're very weak and fragile, and they dissolve and get blown away inside the brain, like, you know. How can I put it? So let's start with frontotemporal dementia. This is a very smaller type of dementia, frontotemporal primary aphasia, which is what I have. This is one of the smaller groups of dementias. I'm not saying because we're special, but it is 4%, 3%, that sort of thing, of everyone with dementia has frontotemporal. I think it's the one that Bruce Willis had, just for want of a name you can put to it. And what happens with our dementia in our brains, only in the frontotemporal region, or initially in the frontotemporal region, what happens is there's the build-up of amyloids and tau and certain proteins, I think, it's something like that, and they block the joining of the synapses. Yeah. Nice. So that particular area of the brain holds language, all our words, dictionaries, encyclopedias, spreadsheets, things like that, to do with sentence forming in the words and understanding of the words and things like that, and associations of things with words, associated tags, if you like. So that's what our tag system is. It also holds sequencing sometimes, and that's where our behavioural patterns are embedded, like all over that side. At the moment with me, I'm getting big issues with talking. When my brain has to search for words for the next one, it's keeping having to stop and just double check what the next word is going to be, which is a bit of a pain in the butt. But so it almost like a type of stutter, if you like, but not a stutter. It's caused by something different, and so they discovered that it's like a chemical build-up of these proteins and things like that. So therefore they can now slow it down by introducing other chemicals, which interbalance things. At the moment, I take one called Dementia, and there's no known side effects for me anyway. And of course, you can't test me with taking it and me without taking it, so we don't know if it's working. We just assume that the science behind it tells me that it is helping, so that's what happens with my dementia. And obviously one important thing that you really need to know is if you've been diagnosed with one type of dementia, that doesn't immunize you for getting another one. For instance, so I have frontotemporal dementia. I don't have Alzheimer's at the moment, but I could also develop Alzheimer's, which is a totally different disease to frontotemporal, or I could develop Lewy bodies dementia, or vascular dementia, or I could even still have a stroke, and or I could develop Parkinson's, which then develops into a what they call Parkinson's dementia later on at the end of people who's got Parkinson's. So the potentials for it is just huge, and this is why obviously I'm happy that helping with study and research, because there's so little known about all these. There's so many permutations of it, a bit like cancer used to be. They've got a grip of quite a few cancers at the moment, but with dementia, unfortunately, because of the lack of funding compared with what funding there is for cancer, then the funding for dementia is hugely less, and so they're still struggling a bit in the research and study. Everyone's doing their best, like, you know, but because of funding, like, or lack of funding anyway. So that's more of a leaning over towards political stuff. Anyway, you're not here for that. You're here to find out what it is. I'll do Alzheimer's next. So Alzheimer's is similar in a way, which is a build-up of chemicals, but these actually are so severe that they actually block the synapses from talking to each other, and because of some other things that go on, they actually strip off all the protection layers of some of the synapses in other parts of your brain cells, which causes them to actually to die. So that's why Alzheimer's is far more dangerous to get than the one I have, Frontotemporal, for instance. And I just have to be factual about that. That's a known fact. Like, but then, having said that, also there are lots of different variants of Alzheimer's, and because we're all different, we're all made differently as well. Even our DNA is all different, like, you know, thankfully. That's why some people unfortunately succumb to Alzheimer's extremely quickly. Time periods of a year or two, like, you know, very short, from diagnosing from getting it to actually death, like, you know. But there are people that I know that have had Alzheimer's for 10, 12 years odd, like, you know, and still I can talk and converse with them, like, you know. Okay, so they're a little bit forgetful and more than I am, but, you know, they're still them, like, you know. So that's Alzheimer's, basically. It's actually the synapses of the cells actually dying, and that is the entire brain, not just a part of it. Like, it's virtually the entire brain is affected by Alzheimer's. So vascular dementia is caused by a narrowing of the blood vessels inside the brain, which causes the blood not to be able to circulate through the brain, as well as if they didn't have vascular dementia. And obviously cutting off the blood supply to the brain is never good. And if you've got something in your brain which is doing this on a tiny scale even, but all the time, because it's a disease that does that, eventually you will get parts of the brain which are not working properly. I believe it's impossible to predict which parts of the brain in vascular dementia will next get affected. And so it's one of the lesser known to dementias, if you like, from that point of view. So Lewy bodies dementia is build-up of proteins and things, but actually inside the cells rather than outside the cells, inside the brain. So they tend to cause problems with movement or just general thinking abilities, as well as behavior and stuff like that. So I mean, yeah, so unfortunately that's again one of the sort of unknown type of ones, and more difficult to get at because it's actually inside the cells rather than something that's outside the cells, affecting the cells functions, like, you know. So now we have to talk about dementia in children. Sanfilippo, Batten, and one other type of dementia affects children from birth up right to their teens, and much the same way as the ones I've described before affect adults, they do exactly the same thing for children. And they're extremely rare. However, there's not much known about some of them because of financial constraints or availability of study material. So therefore, as far as I'm concerned, these are the most evil, horrible dementia diseases of all of them, affecting children. So for me, when I look at my grandchildren and I think, could they get these diseases? Then yeah, they could. But you think, well, why don't we invest money to try and stop that? And I think the answer probably is, they would question how many children actually do develop this type of dementia, and weigh up what the costs are. I'll leave you to decide, why the funding's not there, but we just know that it's not there, and can we have it, please? That's all we can keep doing, really, for that. But you just need to know that, whatever condition you've got, or me particularly, and such is that there are families with children with this disease as well, and that must be, what a difficult thing to talk about. I didn't realise how much, when I told my granddaughter Ariana that I had this problem with my brain, and that Popsy's brain one day will forget her name, that I got just about by with. But then she looked at me and she said, will I ever get dementia, Pops? I mean, that stopped me in my tracks, struck me, my heart, and hurt me more than my own dementia diagnosis did. The thought of that little girl getting dementia frightened me more than what was happening to me. Horrible. So anyway, right, so I've done enough with that. Sorry, I had to stop there a minute. But yeah, so and I've got 8 grandchildren now, so that's 8 times the worry of, not the worry, the thinking, let's say, of the potential of what could happen to them. Improbable though it may seem, as long as there's a possibility floating about, then that's obviously where your brain goes. It sits on the probability seat rather than the unlikely seat, let's say, especially if you're a parent or a grandparent. That's what you're designed to do as a grandparent or a parent, is to nurture and protect and help, if you can, your underlings, your children and your grandchildren, that's what humans do, But of course, when we get to the point later in our days, and something goes wrong with us, we're not complete well-versed human beings any longer, then it's only at the lucky caring of your own family members, of whether you get looked after or not. My heart goes out to people that are on their own. You know, if you're on your own and you've got a diagnosis, just had a diagnosis of the dementia of any type, like, you know, please find somebody, anybody, doesn't matter who it is, a complete stranger or whatever, and just sit down and have a conversation with them. You know, be friendly with them, because the empathy will come for you from somewhere, like, you know. It will. I have total trust in humanity to do that, and you should too. I believe there is a heart of gold in every human being somewhere, like, you know. If this disease hasn't taught me that, at least it hasn't taught me nothing. Like, I've seen so much care and empathy and love and kindness since my diagnosing, and not just towards me, but towards lots of other people that I've met on my journeys, like, you know, people that have told me stories, and I've witnessed help. You know, I've helped other people. It's built an empathy in me for other people, with dementia. You know, I know what it's like, so I can empathise with them and sympathise with them as well, because it is a thing you have to, you know, it's not nice. Anyway, what else do we need to know? I'll think of something and then come straight back. Some people ask me, how can I help? And I say, well, you've already helped by just simply asking the question, can I help? Or how can I help? I think the main thing that we try and instill in the children and students in that is just be aware of what dementia is initially. Once you've got that, and then there is this instinctive need for knowledge and such like that. You know, we teach, we try and educate like paramedic group students and people like that, as well as students in schools, and just so that they're aware of it. You know, I mean, paramedic students could be useful in their actual job if they come across somebody with dementia. Now, talking with somebody with dementia who's not injured beforehand may help them understand why their injured patient is acting in a particular way, and so they may be able to find a different method of caring or treating a patient of theirs that is journeying with dementia, just to give them the best care. It might be just an odd single thing that they say, or ask a question like in a certain way that could make all the difference between that patient being, you know, frightened or thinking that they're being cared for, like, you know. Yeah. So I think it's a question of like, know your enemy to best be able to defeat it, like, you know. There are things we can do against all these diseases, and I'll go over those in a couple of sections time, I think one or two of the next videos. So I guess my goal is that one day in the future, a human being is going to be able to stand up in a room somewhere and say, I used to have dementia. Not a single human being ever lived or is alive at the moment can say that sentence, I used to have dementia. But one day somebody will, and because of us, you know, I say us, you, if you're a student and you're just wandering through here trying to pick out some information or helpful hints, if you've got the disease yourself, and you decided that you're going to put yourself forward for some study or research or something to help out with the data pools of all the information, what they need. Like, I've donated my own brain, so that definitely won't be burnt up with me in the casket. I mean, and so it'd hopefully be useful to somebody, you know, no matter how they wanted to to do with it, like, you know. I just, yeah, so that's what we can do. We can do things. And the next episode or next video, I think I'm going to touch on things like how old you have to be to get dementia. Well, I've just touched on the fact that children can get it, but I'll go through maybe some percentages or something, like, you know, the older you get, the more chance you've got of it. But also, the younger you are, the more chance you have of avoiding it if you do certain things. So we'll see you in the next video. What's after 1? 2. Number 2. Yeah, I'll see you on number 2. Bye. So there we have the main 4 or 5 types of dementia and the diseases that cause the dementia, and what they sort of do physiologically. Vascular dementia is where blood vessels become encrypted.